Good evening. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Urbana City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson. Mr. Madigan.
Here.
Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. First item is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. We have August 1st, 2016, and August 8th, which was a special meeting.
I'll second.
Motion by Smythe to approve both sets of minutes, seconded by Dennis Roberts. Any additions or corrections? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay, I don't see any petitions and communications. I just have one card here from Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood, and they do not wish to speak, but are continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem. And then we have a presentation from Celeste Choate on Library Board report.
Thank you very much for your time tonight. It's been a fabulous year at the library again this year, and I appreciate having a couple of moments to tell you all about it. So state law requires that the library board provide you, the city council, with a report with designated questions. So you have received a copy of that. There's a couple of pages of the report itself, and then there is the 22-page IPLA report, the Illinois Public Library Annual Report. Thank you. So at your convenience, take a look through, see what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. And what I thought we would do is talk a little bit more about different things that happened at the library, briefly. The library, as you know, is a very busy place. We're involved at all kind of levels in the community, as is our desire to be serving everyone as much as possible. With all the variety of the needs that people have, we do our best to reach out. This year we started some new things. We're back at the Sweet Corn Festival, given our success at Read at the Market. We had a Star Wars event in the fall, and you'll hear me talk about programming. Programming did very well last year. Our circulation is up by 5%. Almost 850,000 items were checked out. And we took a look at August 2nd, and 26,871 items worth $521,000 were checked out at that point in time. So we're really pleased to see so much of the collection getting used. This is a little hard to see, and I apologize for that. I couldn't fit it right on the page. But what you can see from here, the orange are the total renewals, and you can see over a period of just a couple of years, your library board that you appointed has made really good decisions about how the public might like to use the library. And one of the things they did is change the number of items you could renew. Sorry, the number of times you could renew an item from 2 items to 3. That worked really well. Patrons really liked it. So this past year they took the renewals from 3 to 5. I know that's a little bit granular, but what you can see easily with the orange is that renewals have gone up quite a bit. So we've seen a big increase in circulation, and where we see the increase in circulation is items being self-checked and items being renewed, and that little sliver at the top are our ebook collections. So we've been adding to our ebook collection because people like those as well, so they've gone from having almost no ebooks back in fiscal year 14 to ebooks being checked out 37,000 times. So we're seeing some trends that we're seeing across the country in libraries, and we're very pleased that our Urbana library patrons are using the heck out of the library and the different ways that make sense for them. We still have staff at the desk. We'll always have staff at the desk for people that want to work as staff at the desk, but for those patrons that want to renew themselves or want to self-check or ebook it, because you're never going to be late with an ebook, no fines there, that works out. Our team in Open Lab continues to be very strong. That's our after-school 3:30 to 5:30 event that happens. It is teen-led. They have everything from sewing machines, a brand new embroidery machine, 3D printing, vinyl cutting, sewing machines, all kinds of different ways students can be creative, homework computers, video games. We passed 9,000 students this year. We had 9,300 kids come in starting in March of 2013 up through June this year, with over 3,200 students, almost 3,300 students coming in this year, which is a great success. And new this year to the library is on our property across the street between the Weber property and the corner of Race and Green and the Township Building. We added a garden at the request of students that didn't have an opportunity to get their hands in the dirt themselves. So doing what the mayor is with the monarch butterflies, we have a pollinator garden for bees and butterflies. And with money from Anna Merritt and help with the Park District, who had students actually build a little free library that should be put in place this month. It will be painted by the teens in the Teen Open Lab. We are going to be using that space to teach people who are interested about pollinators and different plants you could grow in your own gardens in Urbana. So that's a big success in a number of ways. We also have jellyfish at the library this summer. A couple summers ago, our summer reading thing had to do pause to read, P-A-W-S to read. Very cute. So we fostered a hamster. This year, we are working with a teacher who is a resident here, and he has 12 saltwater tanks over in a school in Champaign, and he's loaning us 2 tanks of jellyfish for the summer. And the kids have absolutely loved this. And we bought a bunch with books, money from, let's start that sentence again. We bought a bunch of books with money from the Friends of the Library on jellyfish, and they've been circulating wildly. We had the teacher come in, and he had 70 people come to learn about jellyfish. So programming's been up at the library, and the jellyfish are fantastic. And partnering with people who have interests that want to share them with the community is something that's important to us. Another exciting event that happened is with the closure of the Chinook Air Force Base Museum. They reached out to us and said, could we take their archival collection? And we said, yes, we could absolutely do that. It's quite large. It has blueprints, maps, base publications, oral histories, aerial photographs of the base, over 200 videotapes, and extensive archival donations from personnel who were at the base. So this is now housed in our Tepper building, which is immediately west of the library. What we're starting now is an assessment of the collection so we can see what the scope of it is, and we will then work with some students at the library school to do that. And then, of course, we'll be applying for some type of grants to help us process, because this could be a lifetime worth of work. We're very excited about this opportunity. Another new initiative this year is the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten initiative. And these little cuties have all read or been read to them 1,000 books before they started kindergarten. We started this program in October, so these parents and caregivers have read to these kids over 1,000 books in not even a year, which is phenomenal. If you go to our website, there's a page and you can click on the links to see how many kids have participated at the different picture levels, and you can see all the little kids who are learning so much. Vinyl is coming, and vinyl came to the library. We now check out 2 record players, and we have hands-on literacy and science kits in those beautiful clear backpacks. The kids like to walk around them, whether or not they actually check out them. They like the clear backpacks, which is cool. But we received a grant from PBS and the local PBS station to provide hands-on math opportunities for kids to learn. And we received a grant from Barack Rosenshine to purchase the literacy materials, because, again, people learn in different ways, and we want to make sure that we have opportunities for people to learn in different ways. We're going to build on the success this year from money from Glenna Spitzy, who generously donates to the library, and we'll be buying things like telescopes, microscopes, and other hands-on science manipulatives, so people can learn in additional different ways and enjoy science and math and reading. So this year, we have had a very strong year. Again, programming is up by 6%, circulation is up by 5%. Programming had over 31,000 people attend, which is great that many people came. We've already started a strong programming year so far. We're up over last year, year to date. We had over 500 people come this weekend to the Comic Convention, our first ever. 330 came to the events at the library during the day, and then another 170 came to the movie that we did with Busey Bank, Outdoors with Urbana Love. So very happy with the strong support in the community. And I wonder if you have any questions for me.
Diane?
How is the fundraising going for repair of the front steps and addressing the HVAC issues and the windows, I believe was the other?
Windows and porch. So
Windows and
we're
porch.
finishing up the finishing touches on a job description for a development professional. We had the gentleman from Henneman come out actually just at last week's board meeting to talk about their ideas on the HVAC system. Boiler replacement probably first, looking at air handler replacement parts, and potentially a separate air handling unit for the archive. So it's still looking kind of pricey, but it might be that we can do it in stages.
Is there a total estimate yet?
Sorry. So if everything were to be done that they recommended, it would be over $700,000. But they were recommending a total replacement of the air handling system when in the past we had been looking at replacing out a fan. So we are asking for some more clarification from them. In looking at the boiler, they had specific recommendations, and our board offered some alternate suggestions on replacement, so it might change the cost.
And then the porch is in addition to that?
The porch would be in addition, and anything happening with the windows would also be in addition. So when I have more information, once we've clarified some things about the HVAC options, I will come back with you to give you an update.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Aaron?
So for the, first of all, it's a great report. Sounds like you all are doing wonderful work at the library. Teen Open Lab, 3D printing you said is going on there?
Yes,
Yeah. And a garden.
that's correct. A community garden across the street for pollinators.
So it's mainly that's what it is for bees and butterflies and things like that, right?
Yes, to start.
And you have honey that you give away or something like that? No?
I'd love to have a hive.
Okay. And the 1,000 books before kindergarten, are there any requirements? You just sign up, bring your children there, and you can be a part of that program?
Yes, actually, it's as simple as that, and I'd be glad to give anyone information that they can share in the community. There's a sign up on our website as well.
I think it's a very powerful program, and I'd like to do whatever I could to help out and talk to other folks as well. I was talking to a gentleman in Chicago who does education policy studies, and there's a lot of conversation around Head Start being underfunded, and that's true. But what they found is that the children, in particular low income and children of color, are arriving at kindergarten at a deficit. So something like a program like this, I think, is very powerful. So I appreciate that. And just one question, is there an RFP out for this? Yeah, are you putting together an RFP for the work that needs to be done at the library? How is that working?
What we're doing now is getting the professional opinion of Henneman Contracting, which is the company the city uses to help us assess the needs of the library. And then once that has been done and the board has decided which pieces and parts to move ahead on, we will move ahead with an RFP, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And if I may say one more thing about the 1,000 books before kindergarten, once the kids get to 1,000 books, they get a free book. And so
Wow.
at that point, yeah. But the Friends of the Library support that initiative. And what we've done is reached out to the different daycares and other schools so that they can do this as a classroom. So we know that the teachers are reading them during the daytime, so they can mark off the time together, the books together. And some of the preschools did that this summer with the summer reading game. So we're trying to reach out in the different ways, but I'll talk with you more later then.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Diane?
Could I tag onto that, the under the 1,000 books, the Community Coalition's next Walk as One will be September 13th, and it's United Way is organizing it, and they're focusing on early childhood, particularly in getting kids ready for kindergarten, and if there was a piece that you could include in the bags, and they'll be going to neighborhoods that the teachers and principals have suggested as neighborhoods especially needing extra help to get ready for kindergarten. So if there's a piece that could go in there, I would say get in touch with Bev Baker at United Way.
We are in the bag.
You are
we
in
are
the
already
bag.
in the
Okay,
bag, yes.
great.
Thank you.
Super.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great job. Okay, we'll move on to unfinished business. I think it was a week ago, Bill Brown reported that the gambling establishments didn't have the required signs up that tell people if they have a problem with gambling, what number to call and how to get some help. And we looked into it, and actually, that was the city's fault, not the establishment's fault. Our ordinance requires the finance department to do it, so that somehow got lost in the shuffle, but they're going to do that. And in the meantime, we've been contacted by the state of Illinois Liquor Commission to help them enforce the laws. They want to have inspections, and they'll pay us, I think it was $75 for an inspection. So we're going to have the fire department do that because they go to all the commercial establishments anyway, and they'll get trained on what to look for. But this means that not only will we hand out or make sure that they get the signs, but there will be a check every year on whether they're complying with all the requirements. So,
I had a question.
yeah, go ahead.
So were all the establishments checked since this was an oversight by the city?
We didn't, I was going to go around, but since it was an oversight, I didn't go around to all of them because we knew that we hadn't handed them out. So it wasn't the business's fault, it was our fault.
But there'll be some sort of follow-up to make sure all of them do have the proper signage.
Right, and we're
Okay.
also going to have the fire department working with a contract to the state of Illinois
To do
to
that.
check, to
Okay.
make sure everything is in order every year. Okay, reports of standing committees? That's Dennis, right?
Yes. So last week, the Committee of the Whole met, and we forwarded several items to the City Council for consideration, and I shall go through them. The first being Resolution 2016-08-049R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement. And for the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Okay, you have a revised copy of this in front of you. I think it's just a question of the format rather than the essential
Right.
result of it.
And this is with the Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Mhm. So you made the motion, and who seconded it?
Diane Marlin.
Diane Marlin? Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? No, I guess we better have a roll call. Would the clerk please call
I
the roll?
did have one question.
Go ahead.
Because sometimes I get a little confused between the Visitors Bureau and the businesses. What is the UBA? So there was an agreement. We have two agreements, right, for marketing and promotions, and just trying to see if we're spreading the love around in both of them to various different places for marketing and promotion. And so, as it relates to this one, is it the same old groups we've used, same old radio stations and stuff like that, or are we looking at making sure that other radio stations and other forms of media are used to market?
Libby, would you like to
Yeah,
answer that
I'm
one?
trying to think if that goes into that level of detail. It's the same agreement that we had last year, just with the new dates. So I know that UBA had reached out to some specific radio stations as part of their agreement. I don't know if this agreement, I think this is primarily for our gold membership, so we can be a member of the Visit Champaign County. I don't think it really covers their advertisements.
Okay.
But, you know, others who've been more active with the group might have more information on what kind of advertising they do. I don't think it really covers that level of detail. So we can be part of that regional group that helps to promote visiting Champaign County
Well,
and
we
the
could-
Visitor's
yeah.
Guide.
We can certainly ask them how they're spending the money.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Yeah, I was going to point out, too, that when this sort of question came up last year, what the differences were between UBA and Visit Champaign County, the Convention Visitor Bureau, was that CVB sort of aims outside of the 50 or 75-mile market, while the UBA concentrates more locally. So there's a difference there in where they go and what they're promoting. So
Okay.
Okay. Do we call the roll yet?
Not yet. We need to have roll call.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
yes.
That motion carries.
Next, we have ordinance number 2016-08-065, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2016 to 17. And these are salary adjustments as explained by Todd Rent, Human Relations Officer, last week. They have to do with salary adjustments within the staff. And for the commission, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Is there? Oh. Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Mayor Pressing?
Yes. That motion carries.
Next, we have ordinance number 2016-08-067, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 11, Sections 11 to 62, or dash 62, concerning nuisances. And this had to do with alleys, bike paths, and such, as defined, as specifically defined. And for the committee, I move approval.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Yes, Bill Brown and then Mike Madigan.
Just for clarification, this isn't a change in policy. This is, I mean, we've always required residents to clear the alleyways. Is that correct? I mean, to keep the alleyways clear.
Okay, Bill Gray and Scott Tess.
Staff is already asked by citizens to investigate conditions where alleys are being increasingly blocked by vegetation. At present, we investigate those complaints, and we are sort of shoehorning this condition into existing ordinances. What we're wanting to do is to clarify the obligation or expectation on behalf of the property owners, and also clarify the authority of staff to abate that condition of vegetation encroaching upon alleys. It's not explicitly prohibited. There are other ordinances that we can use to abate that condition, but we'd like it to be explicit in the code.
Okay. Do you think that's generally known, that people are expected to trim back trees from alleyways when they start to I mean, do we need to do any kind of educational effort to try to improve that? Or you just want to handle it on a case-by-case basis?
I think case by case is fine. I don't think there's a lot of resistance to it, but there are cases, you can see some of the photos where it's a substantial amount of work, and we're asking a big impact upon a person who's got to get out there and clear that vegetation. And so having that clarity in the code is helpful.
Okay, thanks.
Mike Madigan?
I'm good. That was my question.
Okay. We have a motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Now we have a resolution number 2016-08-050R, a resolution approving a City of Urbana Community Development Block Grant Program Agreement, Champaign County Regional Planning Commission Youth Assessment Center, project number 1617-CSSP-01. For the committee, I move approval.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Now we have resolution number 2016-08-051R, a resolution approving a City of Urbana Community Development Block Grant Program Agreement, persons assuming control of their environment, personal assistance project number 1617-CSSP-02, commonly known as PACE, by the way. The group. And for the commission, I move approval.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan? Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next is resolution number 2016-08-038R, a resolution approving home loan documents between the Urbana Home Consortium and Highland Green LLC. For the committee, I move approval.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Dennis?
Yes, next comes ordinance 2016-08-052, an ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate, 401 and 403 East Kerr Avenue. And for the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Ammons. Any? Yes, Bill
We skip-
Brown.
I just wanted to thank you guys for forwarding the archaeological reconnaissance survey that Brinshore had done on their own apparently last December. So they should deserve thanks for being proactive about doing that, and thanks for getting that to us. They apparently surveyed every 15 meters. They took a shovel test and didn't find any prehistoric artifacts, mostly historic artifacts from the early 20th century. So I think that satisfied that question that we had last week. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question on this one? Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Okay.
Is one more to say?
Okay, Mayor Pressing?
Yes. That ordinance passes.
Okay, next is resolution 2016-08-044R, a resolution approving a CDBG infrastructure agreement between the City of Urbana and Highland Green LLC. And for the committee, I move approval for that.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe.
Quick question. Matt, when can we see groundbreaking for this?
The developer is hoping to break ground a couple of weeks after the closing in early September. So, yeah, we're looking early this fall.
It's been a long time. Aaron?
So I had some questions about this early on, about the funding, and I think it was Kelly who explained to me that the HUD or CDBG grants were federal dollars, right?
Mhm,
Is that
yeah.
also applied to OMB?
OMB is the Office of Management and Budget. It's a federal organization, yes.
So all of these, so there's several different federal components to it.
It's the home investment partnerships, that's the home funds, and those are used for specifically developing the affordable units themselves. And then the second pot of money that is coming from, also federal, the Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG, and that's just for infrastructure, but it's for infrastructure in this case, specifically supporting the Highland Green development.
Okay, so when I looked through it, I looked for, and I don't know if it would be spelled out in the agreement about any sort of goals that have been set for MWBE contractors or subcontractors or minority workforce participation, and I don't see any of that. Did I overlook it, or is it something that would be negotiated some other time?
Yeah, I do know that it would qualify, or it is a requirement as part of the agreements to use Section 3. It's a requirement for using local workforce in the area where federal money is invested. It's over the threshold of the amount that would trigger those requirements. What those requirements exactly are, or what the goals are that we would have, I'm not entirely sure if we've developed them at this point. but that is something that we can work with the developer on and try to be sure that that they are meeting the standards that we want.
So I'm just trying to understand the process here.
Yeah.
I'm still not quite sure exactly at what point are those types of goals set in place and everybody understands exactly what's happening. So the first conversation we had about this, that wasn't the appropriate time. We were just trying to move this forward because it's been in the makings for years. So now we're at another stage of signing off on agreements for the loan and now for the agreement between the city of Urbana, and I still don't see any particular goals that have been set. So I'm perplexed as to when this is supposed to come about. The developer says he doesn't have any problems with meeting those particular goals. He's worked with federal contracts before. All we have to do is ask. So I keep asking this. I keep asking it to so many different people, and I still don't get any concrete answers as to what will be the goals of this particular project, especially projects with federal dollars tied to it. It is my understanding that there can be 20% goals set for minority contractors, minority and women-owned contractors to be on a particular job under federal mandates. And if you don't meet those mandates, you have to have certainly a best effort of achieving or searching for those particular contractors to work on those, and minority workforce, right? And so this is what I've been asking for ever since I came to this council. So I'd like for somebody to explain to me when that conversation is supposed to take place.
Aaron, I had thought that you'd been provided with some background on the regulations. We don't have a choice in the matter. These are federal dollars. So because it's a large project, we'll need the minority contracting and the local contractors. That's what we did for Crystal View Townhomes. It's the same developer, and they worked very hard to achieve those requirements. So we don't have a choice to opt out. It's federal money. We must pursue those goals, and I think it would be helpful to get you the specifics, whether they're in the CFR or some other regulations, and we can definitely do that for you. I had thought that had been provided for you, but we'll do that, and hopefully as we get a little closer, we can have our developer back here and they can get more specific about how they're going to achieve the goals.
So certainly I'd like to help with that. There's some other folks that I've talked to. When we have a project like this and you're looking for the minority participation or women business enterprises, do they have to be local?
Well, there's both requirements,
Right.
and I do think it would be helpful to put you in touch with the developer, because I think that they could use assistance in getting contacts and helping them comply. So
right, I get that there's a local component and a minority participation component, and I want to help with both. And I think we can achieve or get close to achieving some of those goals. I don't know. I don't know if I got a straight answer from this. If we find a developer or a subcontractor who lives in Decatur, who's an African American owned, I don't know, bricklayer or something, I don't know. Is that okay, or do you need to have local, and does the minority participation have to be like local in Champaign County?
that's a pretty specific question. We would have to check the regs, and that's the type of thing a developer is going to have to look at specifically. What's the radius and what proportion? And I do recall in working with them on Crystal View Townhomes that they did have a lot of local minority contractors working on this, as well as a little bit further away, and they did very well. So,
And in the federal dollars that are tied to it, is there a built-in goal, or does the city and the developer have the autonomy to set those goals?
I don't think we have autonomy. I think we need to comply. So,
Okay, all right, thank you. I had one other question in relationship to the, I know there's two components to this. There's the loan component and then the agreement with the city. But I had a question as it relates to the Equal Employment Opportunity Certification. On page 7 of 17, attachment A, it says the undersigned understands and agrees that it is a sub-grantee of the Urbana CDBG program and agrees that there should be no discrimination against any employee who is employed in carrying out work receiving assistance from the city and HUD or against any applicant for such employment because of race, color, religion, sex, age, or national origin. And then when you sort of drop down to subsection, well, the section underneath that point 4, it says that the employer or this certification shall also abide by the Urbana Human Rights Ordinance regarding employment, equal employment. And there's a component as it relates to people with felony convictions that's absent from this paragraph at the top that is a part of the Human Rights Ordinance. And I'm a little curious as to why that language wouldn't be in the initial paragraph as it relates to people with it doesn't say felony convictions in particular in the language, I don't believe, but it relates to people who have some sort of convictions, their conviction status. Is this something separate in the first paragraph?
Isn't it in the Human Relations section?
Yes, it's in the
So, I mean, I think that would cover it, because that's our Human Relations Ordinance.
right. So all these other things are also in the Human Relations Ordinance, Human Rights Ordinance. So I was wondering why the issue as it relates to convictions wouldn't be listed as everything else is listed in the initial paragraph.
I believe the first paragraph draws specifically from the federal,
HUD?
yeah, the Federal Civil Rights Act and federal regulations. So it's possible that felony convictions aren't spelled out specifically in
In that
those actions, so that's why they're not there. But then the Human Rights Ordinance is in there to make sure that that's covered.
And so I know sometimes it says that the federal laws trumps the local laws, whatever, but our Human Rights Ordinance would indeed, in essence, trump what they have put forth here. There's no one who would be denied work opportunities based upon that conviction status.
The way I understand it, in many cases the federal standards are the minimum, and if we as a municipality wish to be stricter than that, then it's within our power to do that, and
Okay.
we have within our ordinance.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Libby.
Okay, any other questions on this? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Mr. Roberts.
All right, next we have resolution number 2016-08-052R, a resolution amending an emergency solutions grant subreciprocant agreement with Rosecrans Time Center for the year 2015 to 16. And for the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any questions? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
That motion carries.
Okay. We have 4 more. We had a very busy committee session last time, so we'll continue to roll here. Ordinance number 2016-08-068, an ordinance naming a street, avenue, alley, or other public place. This concerns the naming of Boneyard Creek Crossing as proposed by Alderwoman Diane Marlin. And for the committee, we move approval.
Second.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Marlin. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Congratulations on giving a name to a place.
Congratulations to us all.
Yes. Next comes ordinance number 2016-08-069, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class G2 liquor licenses for a Black Hawk Restaurant Group, LLC, doing business as Emma's Eatery at 114 North Vine Street, Suite O. And for the committee, I move approval.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any questions?
No, yes.
Mr. Madigan.
Madam Mayor, state law requires me as a liquor license holder in the city of Urbana to recuse myself from the next 3 agenda items, so that's what I will do.
Okay, thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Okay. Next, we have an ordinance number 2016-08-070, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class G2 liquor licenses for Mala LLC, doing business as Lindy Lou's Place, 202 West University Avenue. And for the committee, we move approval.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
And finally, we have ordinance number 2016-08-071, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class G2 liquor licenses for Northgate Gaming Incorporated, doing business as Lucky Lou's at 1504 North Cunningham Avenue. And for the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
That concludes the report from the committee.
Okay, thank you. Reports of special committees? Okay, reports of officers. Anyone want to make a report? Guess not. New business, ordinance number 2016-08-072, an ordinance designating a historic landmark, 804 South Lincoln Avenue, historic preservation case number HP 2016-L-03. And I do have one person that would like to speak. Do you want to go first, and then we'll have our member of the public?
However you'd like
You're
to.
all sitting. You're already sitting there, so go ahead.
Okay. All right. Good evening. So this is an application that was submitted by Megan McDonald to designate 804 South Lincoln Avenue as a local historic landmark. Ms. McDonald was a resident of the property until recently, and Vision Housing LLC is the property owner, and they have filed a valid protest against the application, which you can find in Exhibit D. We received the application after the required 45-day demolition delay period had expired, and a demolition permit was issued for the property, and the demolition permit remains valid, so demolition could occur in spite of a landmark designation. You can find more about this in the background on page 2. The Historic Preservation Commission held a public hearing on August 3rd, 2016 on this case, and the HPC discussed the merits of the case, also the demo delay process, and the procedures and the role of the HPC. You can find more about this in the attached minutes from that meeting. And after their discussion, the HPC recommended approval of the application to the City Council by a 3-to-1 vote. As I mentioned earlier, the owner has filed a valid protest, so a 2/3 vote of the City Council or 5 votes would be required to designate 804 South Lincoln Avenue as a local landmark. Just a little more background on this. 804 South Lincoln Avenue is one of 4 parcels that were part of a residential planned unit development proposal for a multifamily apartment building along Lincoln Avenue, and that application was withdrawn on June 8th, 2016. The house on the property was built around 1910 at the location, which you can see here in Exhibit A from the HPC memo, at Nevada and Lincoln Avenue. In 1914, the house was sold to William Treelease, who was the head of Department of Botany at the University of Illinois, and Treelease lived in the house until his death in January 1945. Currently, the property is rented to students at the university. This house has, let me get a picture up here. So the house has a mixture of different architectural styles, including Tudor Revival, Craftsman, and Prairie styles. And there's a larger discussion of the style of the house in the HPC memo. That's part of your packet. This property is zoned R5 medium-high density multiple family residential, and it is found in our downtown to campus plan and in the 2005 comprehensive plan as high density residential in the future. So the city has long envisioned this property as part of sort of a high density residential corridor along Lincoln Avenue, and the existing structure may not be consistent with that vision. According to the Urbana zoning ordinance, to be landmarked, a property must meet one or more of 7 possible criteria. The Historic Preservation Commission considered each of these criteria, but for the sake of brevity, I'm going to just touch on the relevant criteria, and you can find more discussion in the Council and HPC memos on the other criteria. Criteria B is that the property is associated with an important person or event in national, state, or local history. As I mentioned, 804 South Lincoln Avenue was the home of William Treelease for 30 years, and Treelease was a prominent botanist and head of the Department of Botany at the U of I from 1914 until he retired in 1928. He was still active in research and publishing well past 1928 as well. Prior to his time in Urbana, Treelease was the director of the Missouri Botanical Garden, which he was head of from 1889 to 1912. The Missouri Botanical Garden is America's oldest continuously operating botanical garden and is now a National Historic Landmark. Treelease was also highly accomplished and respected in his field. He was the first president of the Botanical Society of America, and he was actually elected again in 1918 after having served in 1894 as the first president. He has 2 fungus genera and a seed plant named after him. He also has a mountain near Georgetown, Colorado, named after him. And Mount Treelease is located in the Loveland Pass near several peaks named after other prominent early American botanists. Treelease was one of 25 scientists and artists that were selected for the Harriman expedition to Alaska in 1899, which included several notable folks, including the naturalist John Muir, the writer William Burroughs, and George Bird Grinnell, who was founder of the Audubon Society. After the public hearing, the HPC found that 804 South Lincoln Avenue qualifies under Criterion B as it is associated with an important person or event in national, state, or local history, the important person being William Treelease. Criterion C is that the house or the property is representative of the distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type while retaining a high degree of integrity. The application states that 804 South Lincoln Avenue is designed in the Tudor Revival style. It certainly has elements of that style, but it also has other characteristics indicative of craftsman and prairie styles. So it doesn't really have one identifiable style. The integrity of the house does appear to be very high. You can find more in the HPC memo and minutes on the style. The Historic Preservation Commission found that 804 South Lincoln Avenue did not qualify under Criterion C. They also found that it did not qualify under criteria D, E, F, or G. In case HP 2016-L-03, City Council has the options of approving the application by enacting an ordinance or denying the application. Again, approval would require 5 votes in favor to designate. For a recommendation, the Historic Preservation Commission as I mentioned, found that 804 South Lincoln Avenue qualifies for designation as a local historic landmark based on criterion B of Section 12.5C of the Urbana zoning ordinance, and they voted 3 ayes and 1 nay to recommend that the Urbana City Council approve the application for designation. Staff recommends that the Urbana City Council not designate the property as a local historic landmark based on our recommendation that is provided in the memorandum to the Historic Preservation Commission dated July 29th, 2016. That concludes my report, and I can take any questions if you have them.
Dennis Roberts.
Thank you very much. I did attend and listen to the discussion at the HPC meeting. Let me ask you one question. Of course, there was a discussion about, that there's a demolition permit already issued on this building. Is it true that any building that receives landmark status in the city can be demolished by the owner at any time as long as they make the request to the HBC? I wonder if that's true.
If they make a request for a certificate of appropriateness, and that is granted by the HPC, then you can demolish a landmark building.
But there are qualifications about how that takes place. Is that correct? They have to meet certain criteria?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Kevin? Diane.
So I also attended the hearing, and one thing that left a lot of people scratching their heads, I think, was how the city could accept a nomination for a landmark while there was a valid demolition permit in effect. And I think I heard you say it was because our ordinance is silent on that particular scenario. It's a pretty unusual scenario, but because our ordinance doesn't specifically prohibit that, the city was obligated to go ahead and conduct the hearing. Is that correct? Or did I hear that wrong?
That's correct. I could defer to Jim Simon because he understands this much better than I do. So,
unfortunately, our ordinance in this particular area is, as you suggest, silent in terms of whether the HPC can proceed, notwithstanding the issuance of a valid demolition permit. So in this case, the owner has the absolute legal right to demolish the structure in question, regardless of the decision of the recommendation, I should say, of the Historic Preservation Commission. And should the City Council approve that recommendation, it will have no legal effect on the owner's right because the application for landmarking status was submitted 2 days late.
On the other, okay. So just to follow up, so on the other hand, if we wanted to address this problem so that it doesn't happen again, it would be a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to specifically disallow accepting nominations during the period a valid demolition permit is in effect.
I think that would certainly be one way to do it. I think this experience has probably taught us that we would probably caution against applications being submitted after a permit is issued. But I think if we wanted to be certain of it, then a text amendment would make sense.
Dennis.
But demolition permits also have time spans, and they do. Well, I guess the words I'm not coming through especially eloquently at the moment, but they do expire. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so where are we in the time span for this particular permit?
This permit is valid until September 14th of this year.
So however we act, there still might be a demolition within that legal time period. Or not, depending on what the person may or may not be able to put together at the time, or decide, actually. And then also the question arises of, we can't guess what ultimately the purpose of the, or the intent of the owner might be now that the PUD that was put forward in the Plan Commission, or the Plan Commission, was withdrawn. So pretty much right now that the there's not a planned development at this location. We don't know if there's going to be another one filed. This is basically just a piece of property owned by an individual.
Correct. There are no other cases pending
Right.
on this property yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have two people that want to testify. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Paul Cole. And you have 5 minutes.
Pardon me. Thank you. My name is Paul Cole. I represent Vision Housing. And of course, I'm here to say that we oppose the designation. If I have just a few minutes, I'll try to be very brief. Urbana and the University of Illinois are together a unique community. There must be, or must have been, hundreds, if not thousands, of notable people who have called this community home. They all had to live somewhere. How many properties can we designate as landmarks because one of them or all of them lived somewhere? Professor Trelease, as I've heard, was well respected in his field. He died some 8 months before I was born, but the gentleman has a body of work to honor him. He has botanical gardens that apparently are named in honor of him. And for heaven's sake, there's a mountain with his name on it. Does he need this apartment building? That's it.
Any questions for Mr. Cole? Well, thank you for your brevity.
Thank you.
Okay, Megan McDonald. Oh, wait a minute, there is a question for
I don't
you.
know if it wasn't for him. I guess
Okay.
I can wait for after she does. She
Okay,
testifies.
Megan McDonald.
I'm guessing 5 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. I obviously have a lot to say, but I will keep it short. I've never been to a city council meeting, so thank you guys all for your time and for everybody else and everybody on the HPC, especially Kevin Garcia. Been an immense help. I may be sitting up alone here tonight, but had this meeting been held a month ago, I would have had my fellow peers and fellow roommates who have now moved on to be here with me tonight. And they could also tell you how much that this house has personally meant to so many students at the U of I throughout these last couple of decades. As he was talking about, there is a certain uniqueness that comes with the Urbana and the U of I community. And there's a certain stereotype, personality type that accompanies a lot of the students who choose and go on to live in Urbana. They're colorful, they're quirky, they're a little offbeat, weird, you know. That's what my friends and so many others liked about Urbana, though. We didn't have to mesh into some kind of mold. And after years of being in cookie-cutter, all too similar dormitories, houses like 804 South Lincoln offered in Urbana, they felt like a breath of fresh air and a saving grace at the same time. I never missed having cable once. The kitchen windows on the second floor became my new entertainment system. And from here, I could look all the way down Nevada to the Follinger roof. The cars passing on Lincoln Avenue comforted me. It was my little city block, and I could look down to passing friends as they crosswalked heading to work or class. It was definitely a much different and better feeling than living in a 13-story apartment building that I had done the previous 2 years. It felt much more like a home. And I want to put all the credit on the fact that maybe it was just because we had a living room and a fireplace that we actually couldn't use, but it was that definitely wasn't it. It was a home because it had its own soul. And after 100 years, a century of standing, how could it not? And as Kevin went into great detail about William Trelease and his significance, I won't repeat too much, but it was actually his wife, Julie Trelease, that began my research. There was a quote found in an old library archive describing his wife enjoying the same scene that I had so many times, just many, many years prior. The quote read, Julie was seated comfortably in her favorite spot, an old-fashioned chair in the living room at 804 South Lincoln Avenue in Urbana, where she can look down 2 streets and watch the activity of a busy university town. This quote shows the connection of the past and present, especially in a present that's so consumed by technology. It especially warmed my heart. William Trelease was a famously known botanist, and we are fortunate enough that he brought his knowledge and his gifts to the University of Illinois. He discovered over 200,000, well, he discovered 2 species, but he was able to bring over 200,000 species to the campus from other known collectors. And like Kevin said, the National Geographic Board unanimously decided that a mountain on which he discovered those 2 new species should be named after him as well, Mount Trelease. So in short, he was an intelligent, influential person in his lifetime and in his field. The university recognizes his importance, immortalizing him by his namesake dorm on the campus. So for a city that is so proud and influenced by its historical university, it would be optimistic for me to believe that we would all want to stand in solidarity and in agreement on who has impacted this community positively. Not only were we made better from having Professor Trelease around, we were lucky. And we're more than lucky now to have evidence that he lived in this house so close to campus on the forefront of historic Urbana. How cool would it be to say that's where he lived rather than that's a lot of land of where his house used to be? To me, it is William Trelease's house. Even with all the paintings on the inside that you guys don't have pictures of, but they're there. They were done by college kids trying to stake their claim, make their mark. It still feels like his house. So whether or not the council votes tonight to landmark this house, Green Street's demolition permit is still valid. But what you guys may not know is that they have leased the house for another year. So if their demolition permit is only good until this September, they'd have to apply for another one because their lease that they signed the 6 new people to this month is obviously valid for another year. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was indefinite or not. It's good to know that it's not. I know the moments will live on no matter what, and what I've learned I won't forget about William Trelease. I won't lose anything tonight if this decision goes unfavorably. I might lose some of the time I put in or some confidence, but Urbana will lose a beautiful, beautiful historical house, and Green Street Realty will lose a chance to salvage it and bring it back to its full potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Bill Brown.
Yeah, thank you for your nomination. We do have pictures of the inside, and they seem to be pretty botanical in nature. I was curious when you drew those or when your friends painted the walls if they had any indication that Trelease had lived there.
I found out in October that the house was going to be demolished, and I started research on what I could do to make a historical landmark around January. So the reason that the nomination was late is because I was deferred and told otherwise, that the demolition plans were not true. And yeah, no, we did not know about William Trelease at the time. Some of those paintings have been in there for over a decade. So for over a decade, Hunsinger owned it before Green Street, and every time in the lease they would be like, well, if you like the paintings, you can keep them. But if the people that live next don't like them, that's coming out of your security deposit. So for over 12 years, people again and again agreed, we like these paintings, we want to paint on the walls. Yes, we take it. So yeah, a lot of them were nature. It's just the house itself. There's like vines going up. It's a really pretty house.
Yeah, I enjoyed the pictures from inside that did show the view and the windows.
Oh, the kitchen windows?
Yeah, it did seem like it would be someplace that
You
somebody
just sip
that
your coffee,
enjoyed
it's-
biology would live, and it's close to the biological side of campus, so maybe you had a lot of roommates that...
Yeah, I had a lot of environmental science roommates that, once we found that out, we were kind of geeking out.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Diane?
Were you told or advised to attend the hearing last week?
Wednesday?
Yes.
Yes.
And why weren't you there?
I had a very dramatic phone call with Green Street Realty that day. It was the last day of my lease, and they were giving a tour to the new tenants, and they were discussing whether or not they were going to paint over the paintings or not. And it was obvious that they had not made a decision yet, but that decision affects my roommates and I, based, our security deposit. So I was kind of confused on how they had gotten away with not making a decision up until the last day of the lease. So I was not treated kindly over the phone, and I got pretty upset and called Kevin and told him that I would not be able to make it to the meeting because I was heavily upset. And I guess it proceeded on anyway, and it worked out in my favor. But yeah, I apologize for not being there and not being able to see any of you guys until today. Yeah, it was just...
Was there a discussion about sending someone to represent you at the hearing?
I'm the only one left of my friends that live there and around here.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
basically, it's been me calling Kevin, bugging him a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Aaron?
Aaron, go ahead.
Well, I want to thank you for your application as well. There is something very unique about this place. I've never been in it. I've walked and ridden past it, rode past it, whatever the correct terminology would be. I'm sure Mike Madigan would help me correct that. But there is something very just different and unique about it that makes it have its own mystique. When I work right down the street on Nevada, I often see folks, in the windows looking out or whatever. You can just see up in there, and it's just a place that's caught my eye. There are lots of other places that are around that have never really stood out to me like that, and I've got to agree. I've never been in a dormitory situation as far as college and all that type of stuff, but having an apartment or having a place that feels more like a house as opposed to just the typical buildings that we see going up all over campus now and all over University Avenue and all over the place. I know there's got to be development. I know that's going to take place. But I think there's something very special about this, being a 100-year-old house. I do wonder what and this is more of a general question, I guess, for the Council or Historic Preservation Committee. What are the... It says if the person has some sort of, what is it, they have to be special in some sort of way. The person has to be associated with an important person or event in national, state, or local history. That seems kind of vague, right? Because there's a lot of different things that could be associated with an important person or event. And certainly I think this qualifies if there's going to be something important to have a mountain named after you. I mean, that's pretty significant, don't you think? And for the house to be 100 years old and to be so uniquely situated, I just wouldn't want to see, and this is no knock on any business developers or anyone, I wouldn't want to see new housing or new apartment complex thrown up right there at that spot. I will be voting to support the historic nomination.
Anyone else? Dennis?
Yeah, I guess, are we in general conversation now? I guess we are.
Well, maybe somebody should make a motion.
Okay.
Beg your pardon? Any more questions for Megan? Apparently not. People want to give their talks now. So we could have a motion, and
Okay.
we could have
I'll make a motion
discussion.
that we approve the historic nomination as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion by Roberts, seconded by Ammons. Libby?
I wanted to add something to the staff report, and I realize we've moved on from that, but the staff recommendation was not explained, and I know many people listening haven't had a chance to read the memoranda to understand some of the reasons for recommendation not to landmark is we do believe that this will hasten the demolition, and that's the primary reason why we feel it would be counterproductive and hasten the demolition, because there isn't, as Aaron Ammons pointed out, there's not a planning approval at hand. It's possible that future owner may not wish to pursue the development or pursue a different type of, we don't really know, but what we believe to be true now is that landmark designation at this point would result in a demolition because of the unique circumstances. And I do think that we probably wouldn't see another situation in terms of a landmark proceeding after a permit had been issued. It was certainly not the intent of the applicant. So there's a lot more information, and I did think that was important to put in the record, that particular concern. The other thing we talked about with the commission was, in order to landmark, yes, you must meet at least one of the 7 criteria. And staff did agree on the person of the local, state, national significance. There was a little bit of different levels of agreement on whether it was a good example of a particular type of a style, architectural style, and a few different opinions on the commission as well. But the ordinance does not say that if one of the criteria, or one or more of the criteria is met, then we shall landmark. There are other issues to consider, certainly at the council level, as well as at the commission level if it's related to historic preservation. So this is a lot more nuanced than our typical landmark case, and I did think, for people listening and for people who hadn't studied the materials, I thought that was important to bring that up.
Well, is it true that if there are leases signed that the demolition permit can't be executed?
I think that's a good question to ask the representative of the owner who's here.
Can you address that question?
It's a
Please.
legal question, isn't it?
Well, he's the attorney.
Jim can't answer that?
Yeah.
He's not supposed to answer it.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you very much. I would not have mentioned the likelihood of demolition to this council, but because I respect the proceedings more than to lay some kind of ultimatum before all of you. The fact of the matter is that if there is a landmark designation at this time, we must tear it down. The demolition permit is valid until September 15th. And my client, can make arrangements, and so far as I know may already have made arrangements with tenants. I would ask the council not to assume that there are any facts out there that have not been thoroughly vetted that would control the council's decision. The tenancy won't be an impediment to demolition. We would rather not demolish the property at this time. We would rather it continue as an income property until such time as whatever development project is further reviewed by and approved by the Plan Commission or Council, whoever has jurisdiction, is brought forward. It is my understanding that the original plan was, in the view of some or many, a bit too much in scope or design to warrant a lot of support. And so that original plan was withdrawn, and I know that it's being reworked to make it more palatable to more people. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else have a question? Okay, we have a motion to approve the landmark designation by Robert, seconded by Ammons. Any further discussion? Aaron?
I just want to make sure that I'm crystal clear about, there was a question that Dennis asked earlier about even if there's a historic preservation designation, that the owner still has the right to demolish a property regardless, right?
Yes,
of
the owner
designation.
would have the right to demolish the property because the 45-day hold on the demolition permit application had expired.
So it's only because of that technicality. In any other case, for instance, had the application been turned in on time, then the owners would not be able to demolish the property regardless of the designation. Is that correct?
If the application had been turned in on time and the City Council had approved the recommendation for historic preservation, then if the owner then would wish to demolish, he, she, or it would have to apply for a certificate of appropriateness for that. Now, one other comment that did not come out in the discussion so far is should, and I'm making no recommendation, should the City Council decide not to approve the Historic Preservation Commission recommendation, there cannot be a valid application for landmarking for 1 year. So an applicant could not, within 1 year of today, file another a valid application. It would have to be rejected.
Okay, Dennis?
Okay, and just to kind of go down the line on this thing about demolitions and landmarks, the ordinance allows a demolition of, well, you know, the Urbana Lincoln Hotel or the Urbana High School. But because they're landmarked, well, let's see, is the high school landmarked? I don't know, I can't remember. I guess it's not. But anyway, say like the courthouse, that's not landmarked either. Isn't it amazing how many buildings that are important in our downtown have no landmarks associated with them? But let's say the Gus Freeman House, which is on Elm Street. Anybody can demolish any building in the city that's landmarked. However, they do have to go to the HPC to request it. And there is a discussion and there's a procedure that takes place concerning the certificate of appropriateness. And in my reading of the ordinance, they may or may not get it, I don't know, but there's a procedure for doing it, and I don't think it precludes the fact that a building can be torn down. This building is in really good shape, obviously physically, in good shape, so it's not a threat to safety of public good. So that wouldn't be one of the criteria that would allow a demolition. On the other hand, we have an interest in preserving the historic properties of our community, and whether even if there was going to be a demolition suggested now or next year, this building still has historic significance, and we've heard conversations parenthetically that even it's significant enough to maybe consider putting a plaque on the sidewalk in front of the building, which if the building should ever be removed, we'd still have a commemoration. So I just thought I'd throw that out as well.
Diane?
I will not be supporting this nomination, and I'd like to lay out my reasons for this. First of all, my concerns remain about the fact the landmark application was submitted after the demolition permit was issued, and it was made clear by staff, and it was repeated tonight, that a landmark designation will most likely hasten the demolition of this building. Once again, number two, this is a property that was nominated without the owner's consent. We've had 5 cases, I believe, in the last couple of years of nominations against owner's consent, and in this case the owner has also filed a valid protest. I contacted the city of Champaign just to see what their experience was with this type of thing, and according to Bruce Knight, the city council over there has only approved 1 landmark nomination over the owner's protest, and that was the Solon House in all the years they've been doing it. So we seem to be getting a lot more cases lately of these very contentious nominations against owners' wishes, and I am increasingly troubled by that. The application itself nominated the property on 5 of the 7 designation criteria, but there really wasn't a lot of evidence to support the criteria. The city staff and the commission concluded that the property met only 1 of the 7 possible designation criteria, and that's the minimum. It only requires 1 to nominate a property, but I would hope that a property that's being nominated against the owner's wishes met at least a few more criteria to make it especially worthy. The property is also not included on the list of the 100 most important buildings in Urbana, and when you look at that list, and I hadn't really looked at that list of the 100 most important buildings until this case, about 75% of the buildings on that list are homes, are single-family homes, in most of them in West Urbana, and we may be setting ourselves up for a lot of issues like this in the future. So that's another topic. I'm the fact that the city staff recommended against designating this property as a landmark carries a lot of weight with me. I'm very concerned that no one attended the hearing to speak for this nomination, and I understand, you know, you had a personal issue to deal with, but in cases, particularly when there are third-party nominations over owners' wishes, I think it should be a requirement that the nominator attend the hearing, because people had questions about the nomination, and there was no one there to speak for it. In fact, no one testified at the hearing. Dennis and I attended, and 2 other members of the public were there, but no one spoke at the hearing, either for or against this, although there were some supportive emails included in the packet, but there were no statements of support for this property to be landmarked at the hearing. And what's very concerning to me is how our planning documents and zoning documents seem to keep coming into conflict with our historic preservation policies. And I know there's a way that we can clarify this. I'm not sure how yet, but this is an excellent case in point. 804 South Lincoln is zoned R5 medium high density multifamily. It shows up in our comp plan as high density residential. It's located in the Lincoln Busey Design Review Corridor, which was set up years ago to protect the single-family homes to the east from higher density development along Lincoln Avenue. And it's part of a planned unit development. And we all sat, well, some of us sat through all the hearings for the proposed planned unit development a few weeks ago, and many of us encouraged the developer and the architect to come back with revised plans to scale back the 5-story building into something that would be more compatible with the neighborhood. And I was certainly sincere in that, and I hope to still see a planned unit development plan come back here. And I know a number of the neighborhood residents had the same feelings. So we are now faced with looking at our zoning and planning documents and with the middle of a planned unit development in this location, and then out comes a landmark and a valid demolition permit in effect, and then in the middle of all this comes a landmarking nomination. And I just think there's too many conflicting policies in play here, and we simply have to clarify this process. It sends a confused message to the public and to potential investors who may want to take a chance in Urbana, but also to the neighborhood residents as well. So for all those reasons, and we've all lived in, where most of us have probably lived in houses where we had lots of memories while we were in college, and I do empathize with that. Mine was on Green Street, and it was a place where the snow would actually come in under the door in the wintertime, but I loved that little apartment. But there's just not enough here to support this designation.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll? Oh, Mr. Madigan and then Bill Brown.
Well, I just want to say that I agree with Diane's comments, except for I have no idea about her apartment on Green Street. So other than that,
You wouldn't live there.
yeah. Well, you have no idea the places I lived in Charleston. So, but no, I appreciate the nomination, but I just have to say that in addition to Diane's comments, which I wholeheartedly agree with, I think one thing to consider here for proponents of this designation is that by pursuing designations of this type for, in my humble opinion, is a fairly nondescript property that happened to be occupied for some years by a notable botanist. To pursue these kind of designations could actually do harm to the historic designation process in Urbana. It could actually do harm. So these kind of designations of properties that are, in my opinion, unworthy to block what ultimately will be, I think, a very thoughtful development that will be a barrier to further encroachment on the residential areas of West Urbana is a gross mistake. So I will not be supporting it, and I really think that people who are supporting it should think about what this means long-term for future historic designations.
Okay, Bill Brown?
Yeah, there was a lot of good discussion at the Historic Preservation Committee meeting on preserving the integrity of the HPC ordinance, and they raised a lot of similar points, I think, as far as, you know, how much freedom we have to designate and not designate, that we shouldn't be tied down to if it qualifies under one of these 7 things, we have to designate it, and that we do have the right to take into consideration whether it advances the historical goals of the city and whether it's you know, sustainable and in the long term, I think is something that we all think about. So I think the couple of things that I agree with Diane is that it is zoned for higher density. It's been zoned that way for some time, and that building doesn't fit the high density definition. So the people that bought it, maybe not even this owner, but the owners before that, they all assumed that it would reach its high density potential at some point. The other thing is, if we do designate it, I do think it would probably make the demolition happen faster. I think for when you have an owner's objection, you should have a little bit higher bar, or quite a bit higher bar, to designate a historic house. And I do like the architecture, actually. Apparently it doesn't fit a category exactly that we can put a name on, and maybe it isn't a perfect example of some architectural style. But I like the building. I think I would have enjoyed living there, and definitely think the views would be great. And maybe if there's a new building there 5 years from now, they can still enjoy those views. I guess the other couple things about Trelease, I didn't know so much about Trelease. I probably go past Trelease Hall on Pennsylvania Avenue dozens of times a year, so it was really interesting finding out that he had been so involved and so instrumental in the creation of the Missouri Botanical Gardens and the development there. Maybe next time the development comes around, instead of naming it Lincoln Plaza, you could consider Trelease Plaza. You might have a little bit better chance. Other than that, I think also worth noting that most of Trelease. Most of his work, his notable work, was done before he got here. It was when he was younger, in the 1890s, I think, was when he went on the Alaskan expedition. All the work at the Botanical Gardens was all when he was younger. So really, it was just his last 15 years of his professional career he was here. And then, of course, he lived here a long time in retirement here, and probably continued doing a lot of important work, but the notable work that he's most known for actually happened before he was here. So, yeah, that said, I won't be supporting the historic nomination, but I thought it was a worthwhile effort, even if you didn't think it had a very good chance. I learned a lot from it, and it stands well as a record on its own, you know, a historic record on its own. Plus, I appreciate what the extra work the staff put into it as well.
Charlie?
Yeah, the first place I visited doing research on this in town when I came as a graduate student was Trelease Woods, which we also passed a lot on our bicycles. I agree with much of what Bill just said. As much as I like the house, I'm having trouble wrapping my brain around what will replace this in the future. I'm finding it very difficult to envision an appropriate structure as a PUD, but that's something that this council may or may not address, given that it may not come back until after a new council is seated next May. The issue is that it's a very difficult intersection because of the offset of Nevada into the neighborhood to the east, and so for me the issue is just to wait and see. I don't want to see the property demolished, which I think would happen immediately if we designate it. So that's my immediate concern. So as much as I would like to support this going forward, I want to see what time will tell. So thank you.
I think we should probably move on, I would think. Okay. Sure, go ahead.
I really like to appreciate the nomination. We find that the nominations are so hard to do because when they're contended, they create so much emotional feeling about the results, and it's very hard for those people who are brave enough to be nominators to stick it out, to the end. I'd like to just suggest that that another way of looking at historic preservation in the community that hasn't been very well vetted yet is the preservation districts or conservation districts that are also part of our zoning ordinance. I did recommend to the HPC at one of their meetings the designation of historic recognition rather than historic landmark, which would be a way of honoring buildings for their importance in the community for the various same reasons that we've talked about tonight, but that there would be pretty much just the fact that these are recognized, and maybe entire blocks could be recognized for their significance and their contribution without making it hard and fast that no window can be changed, no shutter can come down, or no or whatever misappropriate fixture has to come off. There's got to be a way of honoring our community that's thorough and more inclusive than the current ordinance. So the HPC didn't seem to be cotton up to the idea of the concept of historic recognition for the fear of watering down the landmark designation. But I say there can be various levels of recognition in a city. It does not mean that we care less for those that are given the true significance of landmarking, but we should have ability to recognize many more historic parts of our community without going through this heart-wrenching experience here on the City Council. So those are my comments. I'm going to support this nomination just in principle. I don't see that we have the votes to have it succeed, but I honor the fact of anybody who tries to honor the historic fabric of our community, and so few have come forward that to turn one down, I think, works against the purpose of the historic preservation in our community.
Okay, thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammon?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
No.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
No.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
No.
That motion fails. Next is veto that I did of ordinance number 2016-07-058, an ordinance waiving the right of first refusal to purchase the assets of UC2B fiber optic network located within the City of Urbana's corporate boundaries. We did this because the UC2B group asked us to, but the negotiations have broken down, so there's really no point in keeping that ordinance. So if you don't, somebody could make a motion to override it, or you could make a motion to keep it, or you could just do nothing, in which case the veto would stand. Charlie.
Actually, negotiations are back on track, and what I'd like to do, and I talked to our attorney, Mr. Simon, earlier today about this, which is to amend this ordinance, which he says we can do today, and let you reconsider it. My amendment to the ordinance would basically insert language that was missing in the first place, which basically waives our right of first refusal for this sale only to the buyers of ITV3 incorporated by ITV3 LLC as represented by Countrywide, and in addition would make the right of first refusal contingent on coming to a final agreement with the buyer, Countrywide.
Do we have to do that tonight, or could we do it at some subsequent meeting?
Actually, it's my understanding, at least my last communication, that the not-for-profit board requested Countrywide to continue the negotiations. And the attorney for the not-for-profit board asked the attorney for Countrywide to consider that. And unless there's communications that I have yet to receive, Countrywide's attorney said that they would contact Countrywide and let the not-for-profit board know, or their attorney know, tomorrow morning. Here's my recommendation. My recommendation is that no action be taken on the veto, let it stand, and Charlie and I have talked about this, and he and I have agreed on language that could be inserted very much, in fact, I've already done that, very much along the lines that he recommends, i.e., that any waiver of a right of first refusal be limited to the transaction involving Countrywide on, so long as that transaction is in substance on similar terms as agreed to by the memorandum of understanding between the two entities. That's the not-for-profit and Countrywide. That can be taken up later or at a special hearing. I don't recommend overriding the veto at this point in time, even with amended language, because as of at least my last communication, which was about 4:30 this afternoon, I'm not aware that the negotiations will take place, and a special meeting can be convened to discuss this. I've already drafted an ordinance which would reflect Charlie's recommendations. Now, Charlie, being on the board, may have more recent update to that information than I have.
Charlie?
Yeah, no, the last communication is probably the same one you got. It's at 5:08, and you're on there, as am I. So we're probably referring to the same communication. The way I was looking at this was to insert the language that we've discussed tonight and have that appear as a new ordinance that the mayor could essentially veto if needed. But but like I said, I think the important point is that it's contingent on coming to a final agreement with Countrywide. If you think we should just start fresh and schedule a special meeting for next Monday, I'm perfectly free to do that. I'm perfectly willing to do that too.
Are we under some kind of a deadline at this point?
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
I mean, they may want us, if they reach agreement. Here is my understanding. However, I don't know if this is in fact confirmed. My recollection is the asset purchase agreement between ITV3 and Countrywide had what we in the legal profession call a drop-dead date. If they don't close by a certain date, then the agreement becomes null and void, or they will not proceed. I have been told, I have not studied lately the agreement, I haven't had the time in the day I've been back, that drop-dead date was today, August 15th. Again, I've not confirmed that. And apparently the parties could not, as of August 15, agree on the certain number of items that they are currently in disagreement over. We'll see tomorrow whether the Countrywide is willing to continue with the negotiations. My guess is they will have to, if there is this drop-dead date, they will have to communicate with their funding source to see if they're willing to extend the funding, which includes a loan commitment and an investment commitment, a few more days or another week.
Okay. Mike?
So obviously, we're not dealing with all of this in a vacuum. What does the city of Champaign and the University of Illinois say about all this?
The university doesn't have the right of first refusal, and Champaign has yet to schedule anything. So Champaign has not really taken any action on the right of first refusal, or waiving that right of first refusal as we've done.
Champaign has taken a slightly different position. Champaign has taken the position that Countrywide and to a limited degree ITV3, have not fully provided the information that we all requested regarding the status of UC2B, the network under ITV3, though they pretty much provided information. There's a question in terms of the accuracy of some of that information. But Countrywide has provided very limited information, almost no information, and they refuse to do so unless the city, both cities, waive their rights of first refusal. I've instructed and communicated with the people I've been, the attorneys I've been working with, City of Champaign and UC2B and the university, and we all agree, that's putting the cart before the horse. How can we decide whether to waive a right of first refusal or not without information? So Champaign has taken that approach. Earlier, I had recommended and urged that the not-for-profit, I mean, it's up to them and their attorney, but that the not-for-profit and Countrywide try to negotiate an agreement, which ultimately led to the Memorandum of Understanding. And should they reach agreement, it was my presumption that they would not reach agreement on terms they could not fulfill or that their investor and lender could not accept. They reached agreement on the MOU, which is actually, they reached an understanding on terms, but then that was to be reduced into a final agreement which not only contains those terms in more artful language, but many other terms that are typical in most complex contracts. Rights of first, or default provisions, notice, breach, dispute resolution, governing law, and there's a whole list of what people typically call boilerplate provisions. There are a number of substantive provisions, not many, where the negotiations broke down. And that's where the parties are at. As I said, the not-for-profit's attorney has reached out to Countrywide's attorney with the hope of restarting those negotiations over those several points, with the hope of reaching an agreement. But at this point, there is no agreement, and we have received notice, or actually the not-for-profit received notice, that the deal is dead, and people now are trying to restart it.
Okay, Diane?
Well, given the number of twists and turns this thing has taken the last few weeks, I'm much more comfortable just starting out fresh and letting this veto stand. I mean, I can't see trying to amend something when we don't even know what we're going to be dealing with. So if it's not a problem, I would just let it stand.
Okay, the hour's late. We'll move on then. Somebody else wants to say something? Charlie?
I just
Okay,
simply
go ahead.
wanted to add that I think that we should be prepared to have a special meeting next Monday. Because this could happen.
We're
very
getting
quickly.
good at that. Okay, I have appointments. The first one is to the library board. We had excellent people applying, and Barbara Jones was truly outstanding if you've read the brief blurb about her. Is there a motion on that?
So just a little
Okay,
parliamentary
go.
point, I guess.
Okay.
So the veto stands for lack of a motion? Is that how we
Right.
should put it in the, okay.
Right. Okay, so is there a motion on the appointment of Barbara Jones?
I
for
move
the-
approval.
Okay, motion by Bill Brown, seconded by Charlie Smythe. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. And then I have 4 reappointments. Tracy Nally to the Civil Service Commission, Grace Mitchell to the Civilian Police Review Board, Eddie Adair to the Champaign County Housing Authority Board, and Stacy Burnett to the Human Relations Commission.
I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
Motion by Roberts, seconded by Marlin. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries, and there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.